Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. This happened back in 2017, right when Tinder was blowing up. Everyone I knew had it, scrolling, matching, hooking up like it was a game. Most weren't exactly looking for love, more like short-term fun. I was curious, I'll admit it. I'd always been more cautious about dating apps, but something about all the buzz got to me. So I figured, why not dive in head first? The problem? I had no clue how to use it. Zero. So I called my friend Samuel, who prided himself on being some kind of dating app guru. When I got to his place, it felt like an event. Our mutual friends were already there, beers in hand, grinning like they were casting a reality show. They made me pose for pictures, debated over which angles looked best, and started building my profile from scratch. Sam was the most enthusiastic of them all. "You need to loosen up, man," he said, scrolling through pictures on my phone. "We're setting you up with a blind date. Time to finally enjoy a real night out." He winked. The date was set for Monday. Sam insisted I wear something that'd stand out, so I threw on a fitted red shirt that made me feel confident. The meeting spot was a pizza joint near my apartment. Low-key, comfortable. It sounded perfect. When the day finally came, my stomach was a mess. Nerves, excitement, everything mixed together. I got there early and sat at a booth near the back, keeping an eye on the entrance. Every time the door opened, I'd tense up, wondering if she had arrived. But time passed. 5, 10, 15 minutes, and still, no sign of her. That's when a guy walked in and headed straight toward me. He looked uncertain but determined. "Are you Daniel?" he asked, stopping at my table. I blinked. "Yeah." He smiled, a bit awkwardly. "I'm Ashton. Your date." I stared at him, completely thrown off. "Wait, what? I thought I was meeting someone named Emily." He laughed nervously, then pulled out his phone and flipped the screen toward me. My profile, my pictures, but not on Tinder, on an app called Grindr. I felt a hot wave of shock and disbelief wash over me. "What the hell is this?" I muttered. "They must have made you a profile here instead," Ashton said with a shrug, still smiling. Rage crept up my neck. Sam. Of course. "Those bastards," I said under my breath. I wanted to storm back to his place and punch a hole through his wall, maybe through his smug face too. I think there's been a mistake," I told Ashton, trying to stay calm. "My friends must have thought it'd be hilarious to prank me. I'm really sorry." But Ashton's face darkened. "You think this is funny?" His tone changed, sharp and defensive. "I came out here thinking this was something real." "I get that, and I'm sorry. I didn't even know this wasn't me," I tried to explain. His expression twisted. "Then at least do me a favor," he said, voice dropping. "Make it worth my time. Come with me to the bathroom. You owe me that much." My stomach dropped. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I said, backing up slightly. "Look, I told you I'm not into guys. This whole thing is a joke, but not from me." He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I came all this way. You think you can just lead someone on and walk away?" I snapped. "Get lost, Ashton. I'm not gay. I didn't ask for any of this." He lunged toward me, and my instincts took over. I punched him square in the chest and bolted for the door. Back at my apartment, I called Sam and the others. No answer. Over and over. I could picture them, doubled over laughing, phones on silent. And I was fuming. It wasn't just a prank. It was humiliating and dangerous. After stewing for an hour, I couldn't sit still. I needed answers. So I threw on a jacket and stormed out, heading straight to Sam's place. I usually took a shortcut through a narrow alleyway between two buildings under construction. It saved time, and I knew it well. As I turned into it, the sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I looked over my shoulder. Ashton, again. "Jesus, leave me alone," I muttered, picking up my pace. But he didn't stop. Worse, someone else had joined him, a guy I hadn't seen before. They were closing the distance. My heart began to hammer. I kept walking, trying not to show fear, but when I heard the footsteps quicken, I spun around. "Back off," I warned. Before I could say more, the new guy slammed into me from behind. My head jerked forward, smacking the brick wall. Dazed, I barely registered the two of them grabbing my arms and pinning me hard against the wall. My nose throbbed, my vision blurred, and I could feel warm blood trickling down. "Let me go," I gasped. They didn't. Ashton moved in front of me, his hands fumbling at my belt. "No, no, no, please don't do this," I shouted, panic rising like bile in my throat. I thrashed, twisting, trying to break free. My whole body screamed in resistance. I was terrified, more than I'd ever been in my life. The alleyway, once familiar, now felt like a trap. And they weren't listening. "I'll give you my wallet, my phone, anything you want," I begged, the words tumbling out in a shaky breath. "Just, please let me go." They didn't stop. They just laughed. Not nervously, not awkwardly. It was mocking, dark, cold, inhuman. The kind of laugh that sends a jolt of dread through your spine. Ashton stepped closer, so close I could feel his breath against my ear. He whispered with a low, disgusting tone that still makes my skin crawl. "Relax. It won't hurt." And then more laughter, sick, gleeful. My belt finally came loose in his hands, and in one harsh pull, he yanked down both my pants and underwear. My eyes widened in terror. I was completely exposed, vulnerable in a way I'd never experienced. Were they really going to do this to me? I started thrashing, kicking, anything to get free. But there were two of them, and they were stronger. They punched me in the gut, hard, the air whooshing out of my lungs. Then they kicked at my legs, boots slamming into my ankles until I collapsed. I hit the ground with a dull thud. Before I could react, a blow landed squarely across my face. My vision flashed white and everything blurred. I think it nearly knocked me out. The next thing I knew, Ashton's friend was sitting on my back, crushing me into the cold pavement, holding me down. I could barely move. I could barely breathe. Ashton was trying to grab my legs again, struggling to keep them still. I was sobbing now, hysterical, desperate. "Please help! Somebody!" I screamed as loudly as I could, over and over. I wasn't even sure if any sound was coming out anymore, just raw animal terror pouring from my throat. It was the most horrifying, helpless moment of my life. No nightmare had ever felt this real. Then, suddenly, something changed. Voices, yelling, men's voices shouting from somewhere beyond the alley. "Let him go!" Footsteps pounding. Ashton cursed under his breath, and in an instant, both men jumped off me. They ran, vanished down the alley without another word. I lay there for a second, still trembling, still frozen, pants tangled around my ankles, crying, but not even sure if it was from fear or relief or just total emotional collapse. I sat up shakily, pulled up my pants with trembling hands, and turned to see a man in his 50s approaching with two younger guys, maybe in their late teens or early 20s. One had a length of pipe in his hand. All of them looked breathless and wide-eyed. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" one of the young men asked, crouching next to me. I shook my head, unable to speak, but then I felt the wetness on my upper lip. I wiped it and saw blood on my hand. My face throbbed. My nose was probably broken. The stabbing pain made it hard to focus. They helped me to my feet, gentle, patient, and led me to their car. "Let's get you to the police," the older man said. I nodded mutely, too overwhelmed to argue. At the station, I gave my statement as best I could. My voice cracked, I kept pausing. But I told them everything. The police listened carefully, and those three men, strangers just minutes ago, waited with me the entire time. I learned that they were a father and his two sons. They'd been driving home from dinner when one of the boys heard me screaming. He told his dad to stop the car and ran toward the alley. That's when they saw what was happening. They didn't hesitate. They saved me. I don't know what I would have done if they hadn't shown up. I honestly don't. When I finally got home, battered and emotionally wrecked, I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls, my so-called friends. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. I didn't even want to look at their names. Later that night, they showed up at my apartment, probably expecting to laugh, to ask about Emily, to see if the prank had worked. But when they saw my face, swollen, bruised, dried blood still on my shirt, everything about them changed. Jokes died in their throats, the room filled with silence. I walked up to Samuel, looked him dead in the eyes, and punched him in the nose. "Now we're even," I said flatly, then turned and pointed at the door. "Get out, all of you." No one argued. They left in silence. A few of them texted me afterward, trying to apologize, trying to say they didn't mean for any of this to happen, but I didn't respond. I haven't spoken to any of them since. As for Ashton and his friend, they were arrested later that week, caught on a nearby security camera running out of the alley. Both were charged with assault and attempted rape, 3 years in prison. It didn't feel like enough, but at least they were gone. A few months later, I packed up and moved back to my hometown. I needed to be with my family. I transferred to the local university, trying to rebuild a sense of normal. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being too bitter, if maybe my friends didn't think it would go that far, that Ashton would be that kind of person. But I can't forget what happened. I can't forget what I went through because of them. With friends like that, who needs enemies? My friends have always been pushy when it comes to socializing, and that night was no different. They'd invited me to a party, again, and even though I didn't really feel like going, I knew that if I said no one more time, they'd start thinking I was avoiding them on purpose. I didn't want to seem distant or detached. So after a few minutes of hesitation and a barrage of texts from Sammy, Diana, and Pink, I caved. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did need a break from my usual routine. They were always telling me I was closing myself off too much, spending too much time alone, and that I needed to start living again. I'd never admit it out loud, but a part of me wondered if they had a point. The party was at a well-known club downtown, a place I'd avoided for years. Just the thought of it made my skin crawl. I hated the ear-splitting music, the overpowering smell of alcohol tangled with sweat, the claustrophobic crush of unfamiliar bodies moving too close. I would have much preferred staying in, wrapped in a blanket in the comfort of my room, the same room my mom had left me before she passed away. It was the one place that still felt safe, sacred, but something about that night pushed me to go. Maybe it was loneliness wearing me down. Maybe it was a need for change. Or maybe I just gave in to the pressure because I didn't have the strength to argue anymore. When we stepped inside the club, the atmosphere hit me like a wave. It was everything I'd dreaded. The music pounded in my chest like a second heartbeat. The lights flashed so fast they made me dizzy, and the air was thick with the sharp stench of alcohol and cigarette smoke. My friends instantly disappeared into the crowd, laughing and dancing like this was their natural habitat. They looked free, unburdened. I, on the other hand, stood frozen, hugging myself, a silent observer on the sidelines. I felt like I'd made a mistake. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was the music pulsing through my veins, syncing with my heartbeat, or the slow creep of the cocktails I'd nervously sipped. Whatever it was, I felt my shoulders loosen, my limbs grow lighter. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let the sound carry me. My feet started moving before I realized it, and I let the rhythm take control. It felt like cracking open a window in a dusty room. I could breathe again. I wasn't happy exactly, but I wasn't numb, and that felt like progress. Then I saw him. He was tall, blonde, with intense eyes that locked onto mine even from across the room. He pushed through the crowd toward me without saying a word. He didn't speak. He just danced, close enough to brush against me but never quite touching, his movements effortless, fluid, magnetic. There was something about him, something confident, maybe even dangerous. Without even thinking, I matched his rhythm, and we moved together like we'd rehearsed it. There was no space left between us. The alcohol buzzing in my blood made me bolder than I normally was. My hands found his body and his explored mine with an intimacy that felt surreal. For a few moments, nothing else existed. Just us. The music. The movement. I caught a glimpse of my friends in the distance, watching, smiling. They looked almost smug, like they'd finally succeeded in getting me to live a little, as they always said. It was strange, seeing their approval while feeling so far away from who I usually was. Eventually, the guy leaned in, said something I didn't quite catch over the music, then took my hand and led me toward a quieter corner. The sudden stillness away from the speakers felt like coming up for air. We ordered drinks, another round, even though I normally would have stopped by then. But that night, I didn't care. The cocktails were sugary, mellowing my nerves, and his presence was even more intoxicating than the liquor. We talked for a while. He made me laugh, and I let myself laugh too. Real laughter, unforced. Our conversation started light but slowly edged towards something more personal. He asked questions about me, my life, my interests, and I found myself answering honestly, openly, like I didn't have anything to hide for once. Then he leaned in again, this time more deliberately. "Your place or mine?" he asked, voice low, a hint of challenge in his tone. My heart jumped. It was a bold question, one I'd never been asked so directly before. Part of me hesitated, screaming for caution, but the rest of me, fueled by adrenaline, vodka, and months of emotional stagnation, was intrigued. Excited, even. "I live nearby," I heard myself say, surprising even myself with how calm it sounded. He smiled, took my hand again, and just like that we left. I don't remember the walk to my house. I don't remember the streetlights or the noise or if I locked the door behind us. It all happened so fast, like I was on autopilot. All I know is it was an impulsive decision, and in that moment I wasn't entirely myself. My neighbor saw us as we entered my apartment. I caught the judgment in her eyes, the sharp flicker of disapproval, but I brushed it off. For once I wasn't going to let other people's opinions get to me. I was living in the moment, something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. Inside, everything turned into a blur of passion. The moment the door closed behind us, it was as if the world outside ceased to exist. I let go of all my reservations and just surrendered to the intensity of the night. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt awake, fully present, alive. It was reckless, uncharacteristic, but I didn't care. But when I opened my eyes the next morning, it felt like slamming into a wall at full speed. I was alone. I was lying on top of my covers, fully dressed. Not even a shoe out of place. My room was pristine, eerily untouched, as if the night before had never happened. For a second, I thought he might still be in the bathroom, or maybe he had stepped out to grab something, but a quick search of the apartment confirmed the sinking suspicion growing in my gut. He was gone. Not just gone. It was as if he had never been there at all. My heart thudded in my chest as I checked the living room, the kitchen, even the closet like an idiot. Everything was exactly where I'd left it before I went out. Nothing disturbed, nothing changed. A wave of nausea hit me. My thoughts were a mess, tangled and panicked. What the hell happened? Had I imagined it all? Could the alcohol really have played such a twisted trick on my mind? My head throbbed as I poured myself a glass of water, the cold helping to steady my shaking hands. But I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me that what I remembered was real. I rushed out and knocked on my neighbor's door, the same woman who had seen me the night before. She opened it slowly, her brows raising in confusion at the urgency in my face. "Did you see the guy leave my place last night?" I asked, breathless. She stared at me, puzzled. What guy? The one I came home with. Blonde. Tall. We walked in together. Her lips tightened slightly. Then she shook her head. Ruth, you didn't come home with anyone. You came back alone. You were kind of stumbling, talking to yourself. I assumed you were just drunk. I blinked at her, stunned. So there wasn't a guy? At all? She gave me a sad, almost pitying look and shook her head again. No. You were alone. I backed away slowly, mumbling a thank you before stumbling back into my apartment. My stomach churned. I fumbled for my phone and called Sammy, desperate to hear something, anything, that would contradict what I was just told. But instead, she confirmed it. Yeah, babe, you were super drunk. You started dancing like crazy, really into it. Then you sat in the corner by yourself, talking and laughing like someone was there. It freaked us out a little, honestly. Then you said something about a sexy guy and left on your own. I sat down hard on the sofa, her words echoing in my ears. My vision blurred. I felt humiliated and terrified. Nothing like this had ever happened to me before. Had my mind really fabricated everything? Had my loneliness, my isolation, twisted itself into some kind of vivid hallucination? Sometimes I try to convince myself it was all a dream, a desperate fantasy my subconscious clung to after months of emotional numbness. Other times I wonder if he had been real, if he was really there with me that night. Because the strangest part wasn't how vivid it all felt, but how real he seemed. The touch, the smell, the sound of his breath near my ear. It didn't feel like something my imagination could conjure. And yet, the most disturbing part didn't happen until weeks later. Diana invited us over for a casual girls' afternoon at her house. No loud music, no crowded rooms, just snacks, chatter, and some mindless rom-coms. I agreed to go, figuring it would be harmless. But while lounging in her living room, sipping lemonade, a framed photo on her shelf caught my attention. It was a group picture, slightly faded. A tall blonde guy in a green t-shirt stood holding a surfboard, grinning wide. He looked vaguely familiar from a distance. I leaned forward, squinting, something pulling me toward it. When I got close enough to see his face clearly, I felt the color drain from mine. It was him. The man from the club. The man I'd danced with. The man who vanished. I was frozen in place when Diana's voice broke through the silence behind me. He was handsome, right? I turned slowly. Who is he? She smiled faintly, a bittersweet look clouding her expression. Peter. My brother. He died in a car accident last year. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I couldn't breathe. My knees threatened to give out. Are you okay? She asked, frowning as she noticed my face. I nodded too quickly. Yeah, I'm fine. But I wasn't, not even close. I didn't tell her. I couldn't. What would I even say? That I might have slept with her dead brother's ghost? That I had hallucinated, or experienced, something no one could explain. I made up a flimsy excuse about leaving the kitchen tap on and got out of there as fast as I could. To this day, I have no idea what really happened that night. Whether it was a mental break, a supernatural encounter, or some cruel trick of fate. All I know is that the memory hasn't faded, not even a little. I can still feel the way he held my hand, still hear the way his breath hitched when I touched him, and that terrifies me more than anything. Whatever the truth is, I've made 2 promises to myself. I'll never again let my friends talk me into something I'm not comfortable with, and I will never touch another drop of alcohol for as long as I live. Every year, my friend Carl and I made it a point to escape the chaos of city life and retreat to his grandparents' cabin, nestled deep in the mountains of Georgia. That place, far removed from civilization, was our sanctuary. Each trip was a chance to breathe in fresh mountain air, disconnect from everything, and soak in the stillness of the forest. We'd hike, fish, tell stories by the fire. Just two guys chasing that elusive blend of peace and excitement. But one trip in particular still gives me chills. It was a cool autumn night when Carl suggested we take a night walk along a nearby trail. Now, I wasn't exactly thrilled by the idea. That path wasn't exactly beginner-friendly. It was a gravel trail mainly used by hunters, the occasional off-grid camper, and from time to time, reckless motorcyclists looking for a thrill. It was uneven, isolated, and frankly, kind of creepy in the dark. I told him it didn't feel like the safest plan, especially since we didn't know the trail well at night. But Carl, as always, brushed off my concerns with a grin, and that familiar, mischievous glint in his eyes. "Come on, man," he said. "We'll just walk a bit, enjoy the stars. It'll be fine." After dinner, I caved, figuring a little adventure wouldn't hurt. We grabbed flashlights and headed out, Carl bounding with energy, me slightly more reserved. When we got to the trailhead, though, something immediately felt off. Parked near the entrance was an old black Chevy SUV. It looked beat up, like it had been through years of rough driving and poor maintenance. Standing beside it were two middle-aged men. They didn't look like hikers. One leaned against the hood with a cigarette dangling from his lips, while the other stood rigid, arms crossed, scanning the trees like he was expecting something, or someone. I froze. It was rare to see anyone else out here, especially this late. And that SUV? It didn't belong. It wasn't just the vehicle. It was their posture, the uneasy glances, the way they didn't acknowledge us, yet clearly knew we were there. I leaned toward Carl and whispered, "This doesn't feel right." He nodded, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, let's take the other trail, the one by the creek, half a mile down." We backed away casually and drove a little farther before parking near a lesser-used trail that led deeper into the woods. There, things started to feel normal again. The air was crisp and clean. The sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, distant owl calls, wrapped around us like an old familiar song. We walked quietly, flashlights cutting narrow paths through the darkness, stars flickering like ancient watchmen above. But about 20 minutes in, a dog started barking. At first it was faint, just an echo riding the breeze, but it grew louder, sharper, closer. It came from maybe 300 feet ahead, somewhere off the path, buried in the trees. Carl paused. "You hear that?" "Yeah," I said, squinting into the black. "You think someone's out here with a dog? Who brings a dog out this far at night?" That barking, it wasn't friendly. It was agitated, frenzied, like the dog had seen something it didn't like. My stomach tightened. We didn't know if it was tied up or roaming free. If it was wild, we were in trouble. I turned to Carl. "Man, maybe we should call it. We'll come back in the morning." He hesitated, clearly not wanting to give up so soon, but after a few seconds, he gave a quiet sigh. "Yeah, all right, let's head back." We turned around and began retracing our steps. The barking faded behind us, but the unease didn't. When we got within about 1,000 feet of Carl's Jeep, something stopped us dead in our tracks. There was another car, parked directly behind our vehicle. Its headlights were on, cutting through the trees like searchlights. We stood completely still, a cold wave crashing over both of us. It was just past 10 p.m., and we were on a remote trail in the middle of nowhere, with an unknown car inches behind ours. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't some random camper. Something was wrong. We ducked behind a large pine tree just off the trail, our breath quiet and shallow. We didn't dare speak. My heart pounded in my ears. Carl slowly unzipped his backpack and pulled out a pair of night vision binoculars he'd brought along, more as a novelty than anything. He raised them to his eyes and scanned the scene, but between the shadows and the glare from the headlights, we couldn't make out much. No movement, no silhouettes, just that car, sitting there like a predator waiting in the dark. I whispered, "Can you see anything?" He shook his head slowly. "Nothing, but I don't like it." The feeling of being watched crept up our spines. It was the kind of dread that settles into your bones and refuses to leave. We stayed crouched behind that tree, waiting, hoping the car would leave. Every creak of a branch, every gust of wind brushing through the leaves felt like it could reveal something terrifying. So we waited, and waited, and hoped whatever, or whoever, was in that car didn't know we were watching them too. We were frozen, afraid to even breathe too loudly. The thought of heading back to the Jeep seemed reckless. What if those guys were dangerous? What if they were looking for us? Time crawled. After what felt like hours, the car finally began to move. It crept forward slowly, its headlights scanning the path as it circled Carl's Jeep, like it was hunting something, or someone. My stomach dropped. "They're looking for us," I whispered. Carl nodded silently, his face pale in the dark. We ducked behind a fallen log that lay across a small rise off the trail, crouching low, every muscle tense. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Then, without warning, that same black Chevy SUV from earlier rolled into view, just a few meters from where we were hiding. It passed slowly, windows down, the engine barely humming. One of the men leaned slightly out of the passenger window, scanning the woods. Seeing his face that close, cold, sharp features, dark eyes that looked empty, made my blood run cold. These weren't just guys out for a joyride. Everything about them screamed trouble, dangerous, maybe even violent. "They're the same guys," I mouthed to Carl, who was gripping the log like it was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. The SUV circled again, slower this time, edging even closer to our hiding spot. I stopped breathing altogether. Carl looked like he might pass out. The tension was unbearable. Every passing second felt like a countdown to something awful. If they'd stepped out of the car, if they'd even glanced in our direction, they would have seen us. We were that exposed. I closed my eyes, just hoping, praying, they'd leave. And by some miracle, they did. After a long, agonizing minute, the car continued down the trail and disappeared into the darkness. We waited another moment, making sure they were gone, before crawling out from behind the log. Our legs were shaky. The adrenaline was still surging through our bodies. "We need to get the hell out of here," Carl muttered, voice hoarse. We bolted, crashing through the brush without caring about the noise anymore. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig behind us made us whip our heads around, half expecting that SUV to come barreling out of the trees. We made it back to the Jeep, jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out of there, our hearts still racing. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes. We were too overwhelmed to process what had just happened. All I could think about was that car, those men, and the sickening feeling that they were searching for someone, and it might have been us. For days, the memory lingered. Carl and I couldn't stop talking about it. Who were they? What were they doing out there so late? And more importantly, what would have happened if they'd found us? A few days later, Carl decided to return to the area during daylight with his grandfather. He said he wanted to show him where it all happened, and maybe snap a few pictures to prove we hadn't been imagining things. He asked me to come along, but I turned him down without hesitation. "No way I'm going back there," I told him. "Not yet." To my surprise, they came back much sooner than expected. When they pulled up to the cabin, I could tell something was wrong. Carl's grandfather, usually calm and unshakable, looked rattled. Carl looked shaken too. "What happened?" I asked immediately. Carl took a breath. "They were there," he said quietly. "The same black truck, same spot." My stomach clenched. As soon as they noticed us, the driver started the engine and began to follow us. But Grandpa, he knew a shortcut. Some old service trail barely anyone uses. He took it without hesitation and lost them. I was stunned. I didn't sleep that night, constantly imagining those men tracking us back to the cabin. Every sound outside made me sit upright in bed. I was convinced they'd come looking. The next morning, I told Carl and his grandfather, "I'm heading back to the city. You should come too, at least for a few days." But they decided to stay, stubborn as always. Thankfully, nothing happened. Days passed without incident. A few weeks later, everything seemed to settle back to normal. Then, a few months later, Carl called with an update that chilled me to the core, but also brought a strange sense of closure. A state commission came out, he said. They found and arrested a bunch of guys linked to a drug trafficking ring. They were operating right there, in those woods. So, it hadn't been paranoia. We really had stumbled onto something dangerous, something criminal. After that, things changed. The area became safer, no more strange vehicles, no more shadows in the dark. And a year later, I finally felt ready to return with Carl and his grandfather. We went back to the cabin like old times. But no matter how many years pass, that night remains burned into my memory. The fear, the silence, the certainty that we'd been seconds away from something unspeakable. It still gives me chills. I'll never forget those years back in high school. I was one of those girls, the kind who floats at the top of the social ladder with a tight-knit circle that goes everywhere together. For me, that circle was Lucia and Genesis. We were inseparable. We called ourselves the trio. A little cocky maybe, but back then it felt true. One afternoon, we decided to start a monthly tradition, sleepovers at Genesis's house. Her parents were often away on business trips toward the end of the month, which meant we had the whole place to ourselves. Huge living room, fully stocked kitchen, and a wine cabinet her mom never paid much attention to. Honestly, she had so many bottles, she probably wouldn't have noticed if we drained half of them. Those nights were filled with exactly the kind of things you'd expect from teenagers. Cheap wine, sappy romance movies, gossiping about the guys in school, and pretending we were grown-up women in a world that still treated us like kids. It was fun, reckless in a way that felt harmless. But one particular night, everything changed. Lucia couldn't make it. She had come down with something, a cold or flu, I think, and had already missed a few days of school. That left just Genesis and me. I remember texting her, offering to cancel, assuming the night would be boring without the whole trio. "Still coming?" I asked. She replied with a shrug and said, "Sure, I'll bring a book just in case." That meant she didn't care either way. I decided to go. On our way out of school that day, we ran into Daniela. She was the kind of girl who walked the halls like a ghost. Quiet, weird, always buried in a book. She had no real friends, just herself. She tried to talk to us in the past, but we always brushed her off. She spotted us near the school gate. "Hey, girls," she said brightly, her voice filled with cautious hope. "That biology lesson with Mrs. Spencer was brutal, huh?" We didn't respond right away. Genesis and I exchanged a glance. One of those silent conversations only close friends can have. That's when the idea hit us. Invite Daniela to the sleepover. Not out of kindness, not really. We thought it might be funny to mess with her. I'm ashamed of that now. But at the time, it felt like a game. "Hey, Daniela," I said, forcing a friendly tone. "Do you have any plans tonight?" Her face lit up, eyes wide and blinking like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. No, she stammered, clutching her books tighter. "We're having a sleepover at Genesis's place," I told her. "You should come, starts at 6. She jumped, literally jumped in excitement. Yes, oh my God, really?" Her enthusiasm was overwhelming, and for a split second, I felt something twist in my stomach. Guilt, maybe? Genesis gave me a brief look, her smirk a little less certain, but we shrugged it off. As Daniela skipped away, her joy echoing down the hallway, Genesis and I burst into laughter. Not cruel laughter exactly, more amused at how absurd her reaction had been. We thought the night was going to be fun in a twisted kind of way. We were so wrong. Later that evening, I sat on the living room couch, swirling red wine in a glass that felt too adult in my hand. Genesis was in the bathroom perfecting her eyeliner. There was a quiet tension in the house, one of those silences before something begins. Then, the doorbell rang. "Showtime," I whispered with a grin. "Come on," I called, tugging Genesis by the wrist. When we opened the door, there she was, Daniela. She was wearing her usual oversized sweater and had tried, poorly, to apply some makeup. Her cheeks were flushed. Genesis handed her a glass of wine. She drank it so fast I could practically hear her swallowing. Her hands trembled. Genesis gave her another, this time filling it a little less. Once we were settled in the living room, Genesis suggested we play Truth or Dare. Classic move. We started easy. Questions about crushes, silly dares like texting a random emoji to a classmate. Daniela giggled along, glowing under the attention. But as the minutes passed, something in Genesis changed. The game wasn't enough anymore. She leaned forward, eyes glinting. "So," she said slowly, swirling her own glass of wine, "is it true what people say? About your dad cheating on your mom?" I froze. I knew that was a sore subject. Everyone at school had heard whispers about it, but no one ever dared to bring it up around Daniela. Daniela's smile faltered instantly. Can we not talk about that?" she said softly, eyes lowering to her lap. Genesis didn't let up. "Come on, it's truth or dare. You're not allowed to skip the truth." Daniela looked at me, pleading, but I didn't say anything. I should have. I really should have. "I know you want to be part of our group," Genesis said, her voice light but with a sharp edge. "But if you really mean it, you have to do something first." Daniela's eyes lit up with anticipation. "I dare you," Genesis continued, "to go to Mrs. Spencer's house and scare her. Climb through her window, give her a good jolt." I flinched a little when she said it out loud. Mrs. Spencer had always been strict, borderline cruel at times, but what Genesis was suggesting felt off. Still, I didn't speak up. Daniela froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "Wait, really? Her house?" "Come on," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "It'll be fun. She totally deserves it after all the crap she's given us." There was a moment, just one, when Daniela looked unsure. Her fingers trembled slightly and she glanced at the floor. But then, I saw her nod slowly. Maybe it was the buzz from the wine. Maybe she just wanted to belong. So we handed her a plastic Halloween mask Genesis had lying around, and the three of us slipped out into the night like mischievous children with a secret plan. We crept around the side of Mrs. Spencer's house, hearts pounding. Daniela tiptoed toward the back window while Genesis and I crouched in the shadows near a bush, barely able to contain our laughter. "She's gonna freak out," Genesis whispered gleefully. And then it happened. A blood-curdling scream shattered the night. At first we giggled, thinking the prank had worked perfectly. "I hope Mrs. Spencer finally learns to stop being such a witch," Genesis said between laughs, but the laughter didn't last. It was drowned out by shouting, loud, panicked shouting. Then banging, crashing sounds, glass breaking, the unmistakable sounds of chaos. We both froze, our smiles dying instantly. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered. Before we could even begin to move, the first gunshot rang out, then another. The neighborhood fell into an unnatural, terrifying silence. My heart dropped. I turned to Genesis, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely terrified. Her face was pale, her lips parted but unable to speak. Without a word, we both bolted. We ran like our lives depended on it, maybe they did. We didn't stop until we reached her house. We slammed the door behind us and collapsed onto the floor, breathless and trembling. "Oh my God, what did we do?" Genesis finally managed to say, her voice so faint I barely heard her. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head violently over and over as if trying to shake reality away. Then, ding-dong. The doorbell. We both jumped like we'd been shocked. Genesis tiptoed to the door and peeked through the blinds. "It's Daniela." She opened the door slowly. Daniela stood there, eyes wide, tears pouring down her cheeks, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She was soaked in blood that dripped onto the welcome mat. I felt the floor tilt under me. "What happened?" I stammered. Daniela was barely able to speak. I went in through the window, like you said." She was asleep. I crept up the stairs, but when I got close, she jumped out of bed. She broke into sobs, her shoulders convulsing. She didn't scream. She attacked me. We struggled. I tried to explain it was a prank, but she wouldn't stop. She ran into her closet and pulled out a gun. I was so scared I couldn't move. She fired. Missed. I panicked. I tackled her to get the gun away. It went off again. Daniela's voice cracked. It hit her. In the stomach. She dropped to the floor. I tried to stop the bleeding. I swear. I pressed my hands on the wound, but there was too much blood. She died. She's dead. Oh God, she's dead. We stood there in silence, the horror settling into our bones like frost. No one moved. No one breathed. That night we made a pact, one born out of desperation, not trust. We promised to keep it a secret. The next morning, Mrs. Spencer's body was found in her bedroom. The entire school buzzed with the news. Rumors started immediately. Some said it was a break-in gone wrong. Others blamed a serial burglar who had hit a few homes in the area recently. The police never found a suspect. They never even looked at us. But the secret, our secret, stayed wedged between us like a knife. In the days that followed, Daniela started slipping. She missed classes, stopped turning in assignments. One day I saw her standing in the hallway, completely still, muttering to herself. "Hey," I said gently, putting a hand on her shoulder. She didn't react, didn't even blink, just kept staring at a blank section of the wall, her lips moving in a whisper I couldn't understand. Later I told Genesis about it. We both agreed the guilt must have eaten away at her more than we realized. In truth, I carried guilt too. Still do. Someone died because of a childish, cruel joke. Another person, Daniela, was broken beyond repair. A few months later, Daniela's family moved away without a word. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. She vanished. We never heard from her again. And yet, I think about her often, about that night. That night is burned into my memory, and it always will be. Maybe one day the truth will come out. Maybe one of us will find the courage to confess. But deep down, I doubt it. After my friend Leth's breakup with her boyfriend, I didn't think twice before inviting her to stay at my apartment for a while. It felt like the right thing to do. She'd been my closest friend and confidant since high school. But if someone had warned me that this single act of kindness would unravel my life, I might have hesitated. The first few weeks passed without much incident. Leth mostly lounged on the couch all day, chain-smoking and binge-watching true crime series with a glazed look in her eyes. Meanwhile, I was pulling double shifts at the restaurant just to keep the bills paid and the fridge stocked. She told me she'd start looking for work soon, but her efforts were half-hearted at best. "I just need a little time to clear my head," she said one night, eyes fixed on the screen. I nodded, trying to be understanding. She'd gone through something painful, and I figured everyone deserves a cushion to land on. So I made excuses for her, even to myself. But then little things started to feel off. At first, it was my cigarettes. I'd come home and half the pack would be gone, even though I hadn't touched them. Then it was the food. One night, bone-tired and hungry after a long shift, I opened the fridge looking forward to the leftovers I had carefully saved for the week. Gone. Every container was scraped clean. And there she was, sprawled on the couch in my pajamas, sipping the last beer from the six-pack I'd hidden behind the juice. "Lethy, really?" I said, my voice tight with frustration. "That's the third time this week. Could you at least leave me something?" She glanced at me with a smirk and shrugged. "Come on, it's just beer. I'll replace it, promise." Of course, she never did. but I might have still brushed it off, chalked it up to stress, until I discovered my emergency stash was missing. A couple $100 cash I kept tucked away in a shoebox under the bed for rent shortfalls or hospital visits, completely gone. I confronted her that night, expecting a guilty admission, maybe even an apology. Instead, she exploded. "Why would I steal from you?" she cried, her voice breaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm your best friend. How could you even think I'd do something like that?" Her emotional outburst was so raw, so perfectly timed that for a moment I actually doubted myself. Had I misplaced the money? Was I losing it? The truth slapped me the very next day. Eric, my boyfriend, called around noon. "Leth's here," he said, his voice low. "She showed up drunk. She says you kicked her out. She has cash on her and she says it's yours." I felt like the air had been sucked from my lungs. "Eric," I said slowly, carefully, "please tell me you didn't let her in." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch through the phone like a weight. Finally, he said, "I couldn't just leave her out there. She said she had nowhere to go." When I got home that night, the apartment was quiet, eerily so. Lethe was gone. No clothes, no mess, not even the faint smell of cigarettes. Just a single note on the kitchen table scrawled in her hurried handwriting. "I'm sorry, Arya, but I had to. I miss my family. I'm going back to them. They're all better than you." Those words hit me like a slap, sharp, unexpected, and cruel. As I stared at the note Lethe left behind, part of me was relieved. She was finally gone. At least I had my apartment back. Or so I thought. A month passed in silence. No texts, no calls. Then one sunny afternoon, as I sat sipping tea on the balcony, my phone rang. It was her. "Hey, Arya." Her voice was bubbling with excitement. "I'm pregnant." I froze. A strange numbness overtook me, as if time had slowed and everything around me faded into the background. "Oh," I finally managed, struggling to sound composed. Congratulations. That's great news, I guess." I forced a smile even though she couldn't see it. "I imagine Greg will be thrilled?" She laughed, light and airy but with a hint of something smug. "Nope, it's not Greg's." Then her voice dropped into a gleeful whisper. "You'll never guess who the father is." My stomach sank. Even before she said the name, I knew. A cold, twisting certainty coiled in my chest. "Lethe, please tell me it's not Eric." "Oh, but it is," she said, sounding almost victorious. "He's just as excited as I am. Don't you think he's cute?" I couldn't speak. My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded in my ears. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" she added bitterly. "Why do you have to be so jealous all the time?" I hung up without a word. My hand trembled. The world tilted around me, and I had to sit down before I collapsed. It was too much, too sudden. The betrayal cut deep, slicing through everything I had believed about love, trust, and friendship. For days, I couldn't function. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. All I did was replay every conversation, every moment, trying to figure out how I had missed the signs. I felt like I was crumbling from the inside out. And then 2 weeks later, Eric finally admitted the truth, after countless denials, evasions, and gaslighting. "I was drunk," he said, crying. "She was there and it just happened. But it was a mistake. Please, Arya, forgive me." His voice cracked, his face pleading for mercy. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the pathetic coward he had become, the man who'd shattered everything for a moment of weakness. "No," I said firmly, standing up and backing away. "You damaged everything, and now you live with the consequences." I turned and walked away, tears burning in my eyes but my spine straight. The realization of how easily he betrayed me made me sick. I had loved him. I had trusted her. And they both turned around and threw it away like it meant nothing. What hurt most wasn't losing him. It was losing her, the girl I once loved like a sister. But as time passed, something strange happened. They stayed together for a while, just a few months. Then, a few weeks before their son was born, I heard they broke up. Turns out Eric cheated on her too, with someone even younger. He left without a backward glance. Now Lethy's dating some new guy, someone shallow and self-absorbed. Honestly, it's what she deserves. And me? Well, it took a while, but I healed. Slowly, painfully, but completely. I learned how to surround myself with people who genuinely add value to my life. People who love without manipulation and care without keeping score. Yes, betrayal can shatter everything, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. Because in the brokenness, you find a new version of yourself. Stronger, wiser, and unwilling to settle for less than real. Hi everyone, I want to tell you about my husband, Gail. He was a businessman, a damn good one, always chasing some deal or flying somewhere across the country. Most days he was barely home, either stuck in meetings or off on some trip that couldn't wait. I loved him deeply, I really did, but over the years something shifted. He started feeling like a stranger, like someone I used to know. Last summer, he came home and casually announced that he'd be gone for a week, off to Missouri to meet some distributors. Normally, I'd have taken it in stride, but this time it stung. It was our anniversary week. I asked him calmly but firmly if he could cancel the trip. He didn't even hesitate before saying no. That's when it hit me. He'd forgotten. Our anniversary meant so little to him that it didn't even cross his mind. When I confronted him, he deflected. Nicole should have reminded me, he said. Nicole, his personal assistant. Like it was her job to remember his marriage. I stared at him, stunned. Was he seriously blaming someone else for forgetting our anniversary? That moment burned. Sensing my disappointment, he tried to fix it. He pulled out his phone, dialed the office, and right there in front of me fired Nicole. His voice was sharp, almost cruel, as if punishing her would erase the pain in my chest. But that only made things worse. This wasn't about her. It was about us. I decided I wasn't going to let it ruin me. If he wouldn't do something special, I would. For myself. I called my favorite spa and booked an appointment for our anniversary. When I told him, he just nodded. That's probably for the best, he said, like he couldn't wait to be rid of the guilt. I pretended to agree, putting on a smile, but my heart felt like lead. He left early Monday morning. Didn't even wake me up, just a scribbled note on his side of the bed. I spent that day wrapped in a quiet sadness, alone in our home. I didn't want to throw him out, but I couldn't go on like this either, always second to his career. That afternoon, I called a few friends, and we spent the day by the pool laughing too loudly, trying to forget. Tuesday was our official anniversary. I canceled the spa appointment. I wasn't in the mood to be pampered. I just wanted silence. I cooked, cleaned out my closet, found some old dresses I hadn't seen in years. I watched TV. I drank. Too much. When evening came, I was tipsy, exhausted, and still no closer to knowing what I wanted from my marriage. I dozed off on the couch, unsure of what time it was. Then, footsteps. I jolted awake. My heart jumped. I thought maybe, Gail had come back to surprise me. I turned, expecting him. It wasn't him. It was Nicole. She stood there in the dim glow of the TV, her face frozen in a smile that didn't belong. Cold, stretched tight, lifeless. My eyes dropped to her hands. She was holding a kitchen knife. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice trembling. "Where's Gail?" "He's not here," she snapped, her voice suddenly harsh like it had been waiting to explode. Panic rippled through me. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs as she stepped closer. "There was no trip to Missouri," she hissed. "He's with Samantha, or Monica. Take your pick." I stared at her. My world tipped sideways. "What? No, he said "You're blind," she spat. "You believe everything he tells you. He's been cheating on you for years, while you played the perfect wife." I felt sick. The room spun. I don't know who Samantha is. Or Monica. You're wrong." Nicole let out a bitter laugh, the kind that carries more pain than humor. "Of course you don't. You think you're special? He did to me what he did to you, used me, threw me away." The words stung. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a part of me fracture. But that wasn't the worst part. What terrified me was how close she was getting, with that knife still in her hand. She wasn't just here to talk. Adrenaline surged. I scanned the room for anything I could use, any exit, but before I could react, she lunged and shoved me hard. I fell to the floor, hitting my elbow against the coffee table. Pain shot up my arm. I tried to scramble to my feet, but she was already on me, straddling my waist, pinning me down. Her forearm pressed into my throat. I choked, gasping, trying to claw at her arm, but she was strong, unnaturally strong. Rage gave her a strength that seemed impossible. The knife hovered above us, inches from my face. My vision blurred. Panic took over. My chest heaved, but I couldn't breathe. I was going to die. This woman, this broken version of Nicole, was going to kill me. Wait, I croaked, my voice barely audible. "Nicole, don't, please. I don't want to fight you." She hesitated for a heartbeat. Her grip loosened slightly. I seized the chance. "I'm on your side," I said, coughing, desperate to find some way into her sanity. "Look at me. I'm his wife, and he cheated on me too. We're both victims. You think this is justice, but this isn't fair to you either." Her expression wavered. The knife didn't lower, but her body stopped trembling. She blinked, staring into my eyes, and I kept talking, not sure if I was saving myself or just delaying the inevitable. My words seemed to reach her. Nicole still kept her hand pressed lightly against my throat, but the pressure eased. Her expression faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. I seized that hesitation. "Let's talk about this, okay?" I whispered, trying to catch her eyes. "Just, let's talk." She stood there frozen. Then, after a long pause, she stepped back. Her movements were shaky, unsure. She still didn't fully trust me, but I could tell something in her had cracked open. She staggered over to the couch, a slight wobble in her walk, and slumped down onto the cushions. She slapped the seat beside her, gesturing for me to sit. I hesitated, then joined her, nerves still raw and alert. As I sat, she grabbed the wine bottle from the table and drank deeply. Her hands trembled slightly. "Don't try anything," she warned flatly. "If you do, I swear to God, I'll kill you." The way she said it, with such dead certainty, made my skin crawl. Her eyes were glassy, full of fury and something broken. She wasn't bluffing. I sat stiffly, every muscle tight, my brain racing. That's when I saw it. My cell phone, right there on the cushion beside me. I didn't even remember leaving it there, but there it was. Salvation, maybe. I fought to stay calm, reaching slowly to grab it while pretending to shift my weight. Nicole passed me the wine bottle again, and I took it with shaking hands. I made a show of coughing dramatically after taking a sip, hoping to distract her just long enough. She burst into laughter, loud, sudden, unhinged. I used the sound to my advantage. With my free hand, I slid the phone into my lap, flicked the volume to silent, and dialed 911. The call connected. I could hear the faint click. No words, I couldn't say a thing, but I knew the dispatcher could hear everything. Trying to stay in character, I laughed too, though it sounded hollow even to my ears. Then cautiously I asked, "So, what do we do about Gail?" Nicole looked at me, something dark flickering in her eyes. "Kill him," she said, as if it were the most obvious answer in the world. Her voice dropped as she explained how she'd broken into our home, her original plan to murder me, then wait for Gail to show up so she could attack him too. Her words came out in a bitter stream, slurred by wine and rage. I leaned in, nodding, drawing her out. Tell me everything, I murmured, coaxing. What happened between you and him? She spilled everything. How he'd seduced her, promised her the world, used her like a toy. How she'd found out about other women, Samantha, Monica. How she'd kept his secrets, buried his dirty business deals, and in return he tossed her aside like trash. I did everything for him, she snarled. Everything, and he still screwed me over. I kept nodding, feeding her fury, trying to get her to say more, hoping every word would be clear to the 911 operator. She was so drunk, she didn't even notice my careful probing. Then her tone shifted. She leaned in close, her breath hot with wine. Are you going to help me kill him? She asked bluntly. My heart crashed against my ribs. I hesitated. One wrong word could end it all. I'm not going to kill anyone, I said carefully, but tell me what you need from me, and I'll do it. It was a lie, but I had to keep her talking. She nodded, lips twitching into a grin. When he gets home, you meet him on the second floor. Get him talking, keep him distracted. Then I'll come up behind him and push him down the stairs. Fast. Clean. No blood. Looks like an accident. I stared at her, horrified. The way she described it, so calm, so practiced, it chilled me to the bone. It was as if she'd rehearsed this before. Maybe she had. Goosebumps broke out along my arms. Then we heard it, the unmistakable thud of the front door bursting open, followed by the heavy footsteps of officers rushing inside. Nicole's head whipped toward the sound. Her eyes widened in rage. She turned to me with pure hatred. You called them, she shrieked. She lunged. Everything slowed. I saw the knife flash in her hand as she sprang at me, shrieking like a wild animal. I scrambled backwards, barely avoiding the blade, and leapt to my feet. Police! Here! I screamed. Two officers stormed into the room. Nicole spun, snarling, but they were on her in seconds. She fought, kicking and cursing, but they pinned her down and wrestled the knife from her grasp. As they dragged her out in handcuffs, she thrashed violently, screaming every venomous thing she could think of. You idiot, you coward, you had the chance to get rid of him, you were too weak. He'll ruin you like he did me. I stood frozen, breathless, watching her disappear out the door. And then I said calmly, I don't care. He'll get what's coming. An officer gently led me to a corner and began taking my statement. I asked him almost in a whisper, Did you record the 911 call? He nodded. When I asked if I could get a copy, he looked at me strangely, but eventually agreed. The next day I got the audio file. I edited it carefully, cutting out everything but Nicole's confessions about Gail. The lies, the cheating, the shady business deals. Then I sent it to his business contacts. I posted it to his Facebook, publicly. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. That afternoon, I went upstairs and packed all his things into a suitcase. When Gail finally walked through the front door, smug and oblivious, I handed him the luggage without a word. We're getting a divorce, I said, cold and steady. You're not staying here. His face twisted in shock, like he couldn't believe I'd finally stood up to him. But I had, and it felt damn good. The papers weren't signed yet, but I knew I'd get the house, and half his money. Nicole had wanted revenge through blood, but I would destroy him the right way. And it worked. The scandal was immediate. Once his double life and dirty deals went public, his company fired him. His mistresses left him. His friends turned their backs. He packed up and left town. That was the last I ever saw of him, and I've never once wondered where he went. I remember the day vividly. Mom had this spark in her eyes, like she was a teenager again. She was practically glowing as she ushered a man into our living room. "This is John," she said, almost giddy. "We met at work." Her voice was light, sweet, full of something I hadn't heard in a long time. Hope. John looked normal enough. Tall, dark hair, a little messy. Beard just scruffy enough to seem intentional. But there was something off about his smile. It was a little too wide, a little too smug. "Nice to meet you, Tara," he said, stretching out his hand with the kind of confidence that felt more like arrogance. I shook it out of politeness, but his grip lingered just a beat too long. It made my skin crawl. Still, I told myself to be fair. Mom had been lonely since Dad passed. If this guy made her smile again, maybe I could get used to him. No one could ever replace Dad. But I wanted Mom to be happy. After that night, John started appearing more often. He seemed eager to win everyone over, especially me and my cousin Liam, who had been staying with us since last year. At first, he played the charming new friend, showing up with movie tickets, giving Liam a basketball signed by some minor league player, even surprising me with a new gaming headset. On paper, it was nice, thoughtful even, but something about it felt calculated, like he was ticking boxes. Then came the big bombshell. One night, Mom and John called us into the living room. They sat side by side on the couch, her hand wrapped tightly around his, and he grinned like he'd won the lottery. "We're getting married," he announced. Liam cheered and clapped like he'd just heard we were going to Disneyland. Mom beamed, eyes twinkling. I forced a smile so hard it hurt my cheeks. If she was happy, I told myself, I had to try. But the unease never left me. One night I was in the kitchen grabbing a snack when I turned around, and there he was, just standing there. I hadn't heard a sound. No footsteps, no clearing of the throat, just him, watching. My heart jumped into my throat. "You should be more careful," he said softly. There was something about his tone, low even, but it sent a chill down my spine. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was predatory. I let out a nervous laugh, trying to brush it off, but he didn't blink, didn't smile, just kept staring for a second too long before walking away in silence. From that moment on, I knew something was wrong. Days later, I accidentally spilled juice on the carpet while John was watching TV. He stood up slowly, eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea how much this carpet costs?" he shouted. His face turned a furious shade of red. The sour stench of his breath hit me like a wave. I'm sorry," I stammered. But it wasn't enough. His hands gripped my shoulders, too tight, shaking me hard. His eyes were wild, voice booming as he yelled in my face. I could barely hear him over the rush of blood in my ears. I nodded quickly, desperate to end it. As soon as he let go, I bolted upstairs, slammed my door, and didn't come out for the rest of the day. That night I heard the shouting. I crept to the hallway and peeked out, heart pounding. Mom was crying, voice trembling. "Please, John, calm down," she pleaded. But he didn't listen. His voice roared through the walls like a storm. I saw him in the dim light, fists clenched behind her, and I froze. Mom's arms were covered in bruises. "Stop it," I screamed. She turned, eyes filled with fear and shame. "Go to your room, Tara," she said. "Please, this is between us." I stood there, stunned, but something in me clicked that night. I wasn't imagining this. John was dangerous, and I needed to find out who he really was. I had to know the truth, who John really was, where he came from, what he was hiding. There was this gnawing feeling in my gut, a sharp intuition that whispered he wasn't the man he pretended to be. So one afternoon, when both he and my mom were at work, I crept into their bedroom. My hands were trembling as I opened drawers and searched closets, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. After nearly an hour of digging, I found it. A small, dusty box hidden at the back of the closet under a pile of winter clothes. I pulled it out slowly and opened it. Inside were fake IDs, at least 5 of them, all with different names and faces that were unmistakably John. Alongside them were several credit cards under those same fake identities and thick bundles of cash wrapped with rubber bands. I stared at the contents, frozen. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just weird, it was dangerous. My hands started shaking uncontrollably. I knew exactly what this meant. John wasn't who he said he was, not even close. He'd lied to my mom, to all of us. And now we were living under the same roof as a complete stranger with a criminal past. I knew I had to tell her, but I didn't want to do it alone. I needed Liam there too, someone who could back me up. So I made a plan to tell her the next day after school. That afternoon, the final bell rang, and I sprinted to the bike rack. I had just unlocked my bike when I heard it. That voice. "Having a good day, sweetie?" I froze, my breath caught in my throat. John. He stood behind me smiling, but it wasn't a real smile. It was tight, cold. My skin erupted in goosebumps. "Tara," he said, his voice low and hard. "We need to talk." I don't want to talk to you," I stammered, instinctively backing away. He stepped closer, and that's when I saw it. His hand slipped into his jacket and pulled out a knife. The metal gleamed under the late afternoon sun. "You should have minded your own damn business," he snarled. Time stopped. The school parking lot, usually filled with bikes and chatter, was eerily empty. My heart slammed in my chest as I screamed, "Help! Somebody help!" But my voice bounced off the concrete like it didn't belong there. No one answered. I turned to run, but he lunged. His grip was brutal, twisting my arm behind my back. I thrashed wildly, kicking and clawing, trying to break free. He dragged me toward his car like I was nothing, then slammed me over the hood. And then, white-hot pain as the knife sank into my shoulder. I screamed. The pain was unbearable, surreal, like my entire body had caught fire. In that moment, I knew, if I didn't fight, I wouldn't survive. I'd be another headline, another teen who vanished. Adrenaline kicked in, pure and blinding. I twisted and managed to land a solid kick between his legs. He groaned, faltering just enough. I slammed my fist against his hand and the knife went skittering across the pavement. "Let me go!" I screamed. I tried to run, but he grabbed my ankle and yanked me down. I hit the ground hard, dazed, but then I saw it. The knife, just inches away. I stretched, heart racing, and managed to grab it just as he began dragging me backward. Without thinking, driven purely by terror, I turned and drove the blade into his neck. Blood erupted instantly, soaking his shirt. His eyes went wide in shock, his mouth open but silent. He let go, staggering back, hands clutching his throat as crimson poured between his fingers. I watched, breath ragged, as he stumbled and then collapsed onto the pavement. I stood frozen, the knife slipping from my hand. My wounded arm throbbed, blood running down to my fingertips. A voice called out, someone yelling my name. A teacher was running toward me, others behind her, but I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at John's body lying motionless on the concrete. Then the sirens came, red and blue lights flashing against the world as everything began to fade. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. My shoulder was bandaged, my throat dry. Minutes later, my grandmother walked in. She wrapped me in a hug and kissed my forehead. Her warmth grounded me for a second, but then I asked, "Where's Mom?" She paused. "She's fine," she said softly. But I saw the truth in her eyes. Mom wasn't there. She wasn't coming. And I knew why. From that day forward, I lived with my grandmother. Months passed before I saw my mom again. And when I did, everything had changed. We barely spoke. There was a wall between us too thick to climb over. She'd chosen to defend him, to protect his memory, even after what he did. It hurt. It still hurts. But I've learned to live with it. It's been over 7 years now. I haven't seen her since. And honestly, maybe that's for the best. My name's Adrian. I'm from Ohio, and for the longest time I've been meaning to share something that happened to me, something deeply unsettling. It took place between late 2012 and early 2013, during the early stages of a relationship that would later lead to an engagement. One night in particular has stayed with me ever since. It was around Valentine's Day 2013. My girlfriend and I had been dating just a few months, not long enough to call it serious, but long enough to want to do something special together. Since Valentine's Day fell on a Monday that year, and both of us had work, we decided to celebrate it on Saturday the 12th. I didn't outright tell her that this dinner was meant to be our Valentine's celebration, but I think we both silently agreed on it. I had this whole evening planned. I wanted to surprise her with a romantic dinner. Not at the Italian place we'd been to a couple of times, but at a fine dining restaurant I'd never even stepped into before. A place with a tasting menu, fancy plating, candlelight, something elegant, memorable. I even went the extra mile. I picked up a few of her favorite snacks, little things she'd mentioned casually in conversation. Spicy almonds, a certain brand of dark chocolate, a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. I wanted her to see that I paid attention, that I cared. I wanted to create a night where everything felt just right. When Saturday arrived, I told her we were going back to that familiar Italian spot. She smiled, said she was looking forward to it, and we got ready. But instead, I drove us to the surprise location. The moment we walked in, we were greeted by a soft, welcoming warmth. Staff in crisp suits took our coats, spoke in hushed, respectful tones. The lighting was low and golden, and a faint scent of citrus and wine hung in the air. I remember thinking, so this is what people pay for, this feeling, this atmosphere. And at first, it really was perfect. We ordered, laughed, shared little stories, and admired how beautifully everything was plated. The wine was incredible. But then something happened, something that threw the entire evening off course. We were seated next to another couple. At first they seemed fine, chatting, sipping their drinks. But gradually, tension began to creep into their voices. We caught fragments, clipped responses, sarcastic laughs, sharp words said just a little too loudly. At first we thought maybe they were joking. But then, the mood shifted completely. It started with snide comments, then escalated into outright shouting. The man slammed his hand down on the table at one point. The woman shot back something in a cold, trembling voice. You could feel it. Every table nearby fell silent. A waiter hurried over, whispering something urgently, trying to calm them down. For a moment, the tension broke. Then, without a word, the woman stood up, grabbed her purse, and walked out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. It was like the entire room was watching a play unfold. Everyone turned their heads. She didn't look back once. I was fuming, not just because they were ruining our dinner, but because it had all been going so well. But when I looked over, my girlfriend was calm. She smiled faintly and leaned in close. "This dinner's a show all on its own," she whispered with a wink. God, I loved her in that moment. She didn't let the negativity ruin her night. Instead, she found humor in it. That kind of optimism, cool-headedness in the face of chaos. It stayed with me. The man stared toward the door for a long second, his expression unreadable. Then he slowly got up and followed her out. For a while, we thought it was over. Relief settled in the room like dust. We tried to refocus, to enjoy what remained of the evening. But no. Not 5 minutes later, the couple reappeared, this time accompanied by the maître d'. Their faces were flushed, a mixture of embarrassment and residual anger. There were awkward glances exchanged between tables, a few nervous laughs barely held back. It was almost absurd, like something out of a dark comedy. They sat back down, visibly trying to act like nothing had happened. We all hoped that would be the end of it, that maybe they'd calm down enough to finish their meals and leave quietly. But the calm was short-lived. Soon the argument started again. This time it was quieter, more venomous. Low tones, but filled with barely concealed rage. Their energy was contagious, not in a good way. It changed the air. It was no longer just an uncomfortable moment in a restaurant. It felt darker. I remember staring down at my plate, fork poised in my hand, trying to focus on my girlfriend's face across from me. Those sparkling eyes, the way her lips curled into that encouraging smile, but the couple's fight next to us drowned it all out. It was as if a storm had settled into the restaurant. The violence in their voices wasn't loud anymore, but it was restrained, like a scream muffled by a pillow, and everyone could feel it, like a chill spreading under the surface. No one spoke. No one knew what to do. The atmosphere had changed completely. What began as a night of celebration became a night of quiet unease. I had this sinking feeling that the fight wasn't just ruining our evening. It was about to explode into something far worse. My instincts were right. The girl from the couple stood up again, only this time, she didn't head for the door. What she did next took everyone by complete surprise. Without a word, and seemingly oblivious, or maybe deliberately defiant of the horrified stares around her, she reached down and slipped off one of her heels. For a split second, we didn't understand what she was doing, but then, in a sudden, violent gesture, she hurled the shoe straight at the guy across from her. The heel struck him squarely on the side of the head. The sound it made wasn't what anyone expected, not a sharp crack or a scream of pain. It was a sick, muted thud. The kind of sound that instantly made your stomach twist. A collective chill swept over the room. He didn't cry out. He didn't fall immediately. Instead, he froze. His whole body locked up, like he was hit with a jolt of electricity. Then, almost in slow motion, he shot up from his chair, arms flailing, sending glasses and plates crashing to the floor before collapsing with a thud. He hit the ground hard and started convulsing. It was horrifying. Chairs scraped back, people gasped, someone screamed. For a second, no one moved. No one knew what to do. Then chaos erupted around us. A few people rushed forward. My fiancée, thank God, reacted instantly. She was a nurse, and everything about her changed in that moment. Her face went from confused to focused in an instant. "Move the table! Clear this space!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. Waiters scrambled to obey. She turned to me and said, "Give me your jacket now." I peeled it off and handed it over with trembling hands. She knelt beside the guy, folding the jacket and placing it gently beneath his head to protect it. Her hands moved with calm precision, checking his breathing, watching his convulsions. She kept whispering to him, her voice low and steady, like she was trying to anchor him back to consciousness. I stood there, frozen, useless. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear anything else. One minute we were clinking wine glasses, the next we were in the middle of a violent outburst and a full-blown medical emergency. It was like the air had changed, thick with fear, electric with disbelief. All around us, chairs were overturned, silverware scattered across the floor. Some people tried to help, others just stood in shock. A few had their phones out, filming. That part still bothers me. We weren't just in the middle of something tragic. We were being consumed by spectacle. Yet there she was, my fiancée, focused, unwavering. She kept holding the guy's shoulders down gently, monitoring his breathing, shielding his head from the tile floor. I'd never seen her like that. It was as if chaos energized her to be more human, more composed. And I just stood there, rattled to the core. The paramedics arrived after what felt like an eternity, but couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. The moment they walked in with their medical gear and serious faces, everything somehow felt even more surreal. The flashing lights from outside painted the room with an eerie red glow. They moved quickly. One of them nodded at my fiancée and asked for a quick summary of what happened. She gave it to them concisely and stepped back to give them space, though her eyes never left the boy lying there. He'd stopped shaking by then, but the image of his body jerking uncontrollably was burned into my mind. As for the girl, the one who threw the heel, I don't know what happened to her. No one tackled her, no one screamed at her. She just stood there trembling, frozen in a bizarre silence. A few people looked like they wanted to intervene, but there was a palpable fear in the air, like no one wanted to provoke another sudden outburst. I remember catching a glimpse of her expression. It wasn't rage anymore. It was something deeper, colder. Numbness, maybe, or regret. The entire ordeal was a chilling display of how quickly everything can fall apart. As the paramedics tended to the guy, I stood there with that same unshakable question running through my head. What happened? What could push someone to snap like that in public, surrounded by strangers? What had he done, or said, that ignited that kind of response? Even after he was wheeled away, I couldn't shake the dread. The evening had shattered into something jagged and grotesque. My fiancée finally turned to me, her hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Her eyes met mine and I saw it. That same unease, that same question I couldn't put into words. We both knew it was time to go. We paid quietly and walked out without saying much. As we stepped into the cold night air, the wind slapped us with a strange sense of relief. But it didn't wash away the feeling. If anything, it intensified it. We walked in silence for a while. The world outside was normal. Quiet streets, distant cars, street lamps flickering. But inside, something had shifted. It wasn't just about escaping the restaurant. It felt like we were carrying part of it with us. I kept wondering, what kind of relationship were they in? What pain had built up behind closed doors to lead to something so violent, so public? That heel had carried more than weight. It had carried rage. And that moment forced me to confront the terrifying truth. Relationships, even ones that seem perfectly normal from the outside, can rot from within. That night became more than a memory. It became a kind of warning, a harsh, cold reminder that love and destruction are sometimes separated by a single step. What began as a celebration of romance had turned into a chaotic mess of pain and unpredictability. And yet, through all of it, we stayed together. Years later, we sometimes laugh about the absurdity of it all, the drama, the horror, the sheer unexpectedness of it. But beneath the laughter is a quiet understanding. That night showed us something real, something raw. The world isn't always beautiful. People aren't always predictable. And sometimes the most important lessons are the ones that chill you to the bone. My name is Manuel, and I swear to you, this story I'm about to tell is real. It began like any normal Friday night, just a casual get-together, but it quickly spiraled into something none of us were prepared for. We were a tight-knit group of friends, Matthias, Victor, Oliver, Veronica, and me. Every Friday we had a ritual: meet at Matthias's place, hang out in his basement, devour some pizza, and throw on a movie or two while cracking jokes and unwinding after the week. Matthias's basement was our little haven. It had this lived-in coziness with plush couches that practically swallowed you whole, an enormous TV that dominated the wall, and shelves stuffed with video games and DVDs, like some shrine to geekdom. Only a true cinephile could have curated that collection. When we got there that evening, Matthias greeted us with a wide grin and a glint of excitement in his eyes. "You guys are gonna love this," he said, holding up a hard drive. "Found this series. Never released on Netflix. Super rare. It's called Midnight Visions." We exchanged curious glances. "What's it about?" I asked. Matthias just shrugged, the grin never leaving his face. "Kinda hard to explain. It's experimental, you'll see." That kind of cryptic answer was classic Matthias. We didn't press him. We grabbed our pizza, settled into the couches, and he hit play. The first episode opened with a group of friends, ironically a lot like us, hanging out in a house that looked eerily similar to Matthias's. Same kind of couch, same ambient lighting, same number of people. They were laughing, joking around, everything casual. But then something shifted. The characters' moods turned dark. They watched something on TV that visibly disturbed them, though we, the audience, never saw what it was, just their reactions. Their expressions morphed from amusement to confusion to outright horror in seconds. It was deeply unsettling. While Matthias, Oliver, and I leaned in, trying to piece it together, Victor cracked jokes to ease the tension. Veronica, predictably, had dozed off, curled up on the far side of the couch with a throw blanket. As the episodes went on, we noticed a pattern. Each one featured a different group of friends in different homes, but always with the same outcome. Something unseen would invade their lives. An intruder. Chaos would unfold. But it was subtle at first. Creeping dread. And each episode would end abruptly, always cutting away just before the final character was killed. Off-screen. No resolution. By the time the third episode ended, Veronica stirred awake and got up to use the bathroom. When she came back, her face had gone ghostly pale. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I think we should stop watching this," she said softly. We laughed, awkwardly, assuming she was just spooked by a bad dream. But her eyes told a different story. Still, we agreed to take a break and headed to the kitchen to grab more drinks. While sipping soda and half-heartedly debating the series, Ethan, sorry I meant Oliver, looked at us, his expression tight. "Guys, have any of you noticed anything weird?" Victor scoffed. "Yeah, the show sucks." "No, I mean, the houses in the episodes, they look a lot like mine," Oliver said, voice low. A pause followed. We looked at each other. "Come on, man," I said, half laughing. "Matthias probably edited it himself. This whole thing smells like one of his elaborate pranks." Matthias didn't deny it, but he also didn't confirm it. That sly smile of his wavered just slightly. Still, we convinced ourselves it was a stunt. That's what we wanted to believe. So we went back to the basement, determined to see it through. The fourth episode began and the unease in the room tripled. This time it was different. The group of friends on screen, same number as us, same seating arrangement, looked exactly like us, not just similar. Identical. The house? Matthias's basement, down to the scuff mark on the wall by the staircase and the old game console in the corner. We stared in stunned silence. On screen, the doppelgangers watched TV, visibly tense. Then they heard a noise, a thud, then footsteps, just like we had minutes earlier. Then, right on cue, thud. This time it was real. In our house. We sat frozen, trying to figure out whether the sound had come from the speakers or somewhere upstairs. It didn't help that the show's audio was intentionally mixed to blur that line. Oliver stood slowly, hesitant. "I'll check it out," he said, trying to sound brave. He disappeared up the stairs and we listened, every second stretching like an hour. A few minutes later he came back, eyebrows raised. Nothing. Probably the wind. Matthias forced a chuckle, but his voice had a crack in it. "Yeah, probably." We returned to the couch. No one said it, but none of us wanted to be the first to suggest turning it off. We needed to see where it went. The fifth and final episode started. What unfolded made our blood run cold. The characters, again, mirrored versions of us, sat watching midnight visions. They discussed how the episodes were starting to mimic their lives, just like we had. The show was feeding off them, off us. The illusion shattered. This wasn't a series anymore. It was us, our story. As realization hit, a chill swept through the room. It wasn't just fiction. It was reflecting now. It was alive. Matthias pressed pause. The screen froze on our mirror selves. He stood up slowly, the smile gone. He looked different, serious, almost blank. The room fell into a tense silence. Then came the noises again, louder, closer. Footsteps, the creak of doors upstairs, murmurs like someone whispering secrets just out of earshot. "Is this still part of your prank?" I asked, voice cracking. Matthias didn't answer. He just looked at us, a strange glint in his eye. Then he picked up the remote and opened the home screen. It wasn't Netflix. It looked like it, but it wasn't. The interface was unfamiliar. The titles weren't shows we'd ever heard of. The language, scrambled. "This isn't Netflix," Veronica whispered. Matthias glanced back at us. "It's not supposed to be," he said. I asked, my voice trembling as fear gripped me tighter with each breath. "What is this?" Matthias turned slowly, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "Welcome to my movie," he said, laughing, a chilling, hollow laugh that echoed off the walls. "And you're the stars of the night." Panic surged through us instantly. That laugh, once familiar, had twisted into something monstrous. Before any of us could move, the basement was plunged into complete darkness. The soft hum of electricity cut off. Silence fell, only broken by the faint sound of approaching footsteps and the metallic clank of a door closing. "Matthias?" Veronica called out weakly, but he was gone. Confused and terrified, we scrambled through the pitch black, bumping into furniture and each other trying to find the exit. The darkness felt suffocating, thick like fog in our lungs. Then, suddenly, the TV flickered back on. But what it showed made our blood run cold. On the screen we saw ourselves captured in stark night vision, trapped in the basement, our faces pale and full of fear. Behind us, a hooded figure crept closer in the shadows. No, this isn't happening," I whispered. "It's just like the episodes," Oliver said in a hoarse voice. "Run!" he suddenly screamed. We tried. God, we tried. But the door wouldn't budge. It was locked tight. There were no windows, no escape. The hooded figure lunged, and in the chaos we scattered in every direction. I sprinted toward the far corner of the basement, searching desperately for a way out. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. My breath came in shallow, frantic gasps. My friends screamed behind me, their voices growing distant and distorted. I ducked into a small service door and crawled into a cramped storage room, slamming the thin wooden panel shut behind me. Inside, I curled into myself, trying to silence my breathing, trying not to sob. Outside, the screams grew louder, agonized. Then, one by one, they stopped. A dreadful silence settled in. Then came a creak. The storage room door opened, slowly. I looked up. It was Oliver, but it wasn't. His face was pale, his head lolled unnaturally. His lifeless eyes stared through me. And behind him stood Matthias, grinning as he held Oliver's corpse like some kind of grotesque puppet. "Is there room for two in there, buddy?" he asked, voice low and gleefully deranged. A jolt of terror shot through me, but something else sparked too. Adrenaline. I couldn't freeze. Not now. I had to act. I launched myself at him, screaming, trying to grab the camera slung over his shoulder, maybe use it as a weapon. Maybe I could hurt him, get out, find help. But Matthias was stronger than he looked. Much stronger. He caught me mid-swing and threw me down hard, dragging me back into the open basement. The lights flickered back on, and there they were, my friends, tied up, bloodied, and terrified. They watched helplessly as I struggled, as Matthias loomed over me, the camera now pointed straight at my face. "I hope your reactions are worth it," he said, a sinister smirk playing on his lips. "Since you're the last to die, we'll have a little extra fun. You're the star now. When we're done, we'll pay your sister a visit. Turn her world to ash." "No!" I screamed, rage and horror exploding out of me. I fought to rise, my fists flailing wildly, but he struck me, again and again until I was on the floor, dazed. Blood dripped from my face, mixing with hot tears. My vision blurred, everything spinning. My limbs wouldn't respond. How had it come to this? Hours ago, we were just a group of friends laughing in this very room. Now I was inches from death. Then, crack. A brutal kick to the side of my head sent me spiraling into unconsciousness. Darkness crept in. My eyelids fell heavy. I tried to fight it, to hold on, but I couldn't. The world faded. And then, light. I woke up in a hospital bed, head bandaged, body bruised and aching. Machines beeped steadily around me. I could barely move, but I was alive. A police officer sat nearby. "You're safe now," he said softly. They had found me unconscious in Matthias's basement. Oliver's body was beside me. The others were still tied up in the corner, shaken, but alive. Matthias had vanished. A manhunt was underway. It should have ended there. But days later, I received an email from an anonymous account. No message, just a link. I clicked it. It was the video. Matthias had edited everything into a full-length horror movie. There we were, me and my friends, terrified, screaming, bleeding. Every second filmed, polished like it was part of some twisted film festival submission. At the end was a note. Oliver makes bad decisions. It wasn't ideal. But you and your friends, you lived up to the role. Kudos for the starring performance, my friend. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. It was the final chapter of Midnight Visions. Only this time, we were the protagonists. I sent the footage to the police. They confirmed it with our statements and evidence from the scene. Soon after, Matthias was found near the border and arrested. It was over. Oliver was gone, but justice was finally being served. We weren't just another episode in his 6 series. We were the ending. Together, we had survived our worst nightmare and ensured that evil wouldn't roll credits without facing the consequences.